What's up, guys? What's going on? Hope you guys are well. So today we're going to talk about something that is overlooked a lot in astrology and not talked about so much, but hugely important. That is out of bounds planets. So I will explain in this video what they are, if you have, how to know if you have 1, 2, 3, maybe even more, or 0. Of these, it's a game changer. When I found out I have Moon and Jupiter and Uranus out of bounds, I was like, okay, this makes so much sense. So we'll get into that. We'll explain what this means. You know, a lot of people who have different out of bounds energies. We'll go planet by planet, but you feel like you're moving. It's this very pioneering energy with a planet. Like you move through the world a bit differently. You don't quite follow the rules. It's just also linked to this very raw energy in the area linked to that planet. So as you can tell, out of bounds Moon, out of bounds Venus, out of bounds Mars, out of bounds, etc. So we're going to go through all those. So buckle up and run the intro and let's get into it. All right. All right, guys, so welcome to the video. So first thing is, what is an out-of-bounds planet? Well, in a natal chart, I wish I could have a 3D or 5D diagram, but basically when we're talking about a planet, right, let's say you have Sun square Pluto, that is about, on the ecliptic plane, that's about the longitude between where the Sun was at birth and where Pluto was on longitude. Now, because the planets are not always exactly on that plane, this is what declinations are about, right? It's like it's just like when you look at a natal chart, you see that there's the west, the west is shown the opposite direction, but you have the ascendant, the descendant, which are horizontal, and then you have the midheaven and the IC, so north south. So you have all, declinations are the cousin to aspects that aren't really talked about enough, but I talk about them a lot in my readings. So basically, out of bounds is when a planet is 23 degrees and 27 minutes, right? Either plus or minus. And I'll tell you guys, don't worry about, I'm going to tell you guys how to figure this out. It's not that hard. It is a little bit annoying, but I'm going to give you guys exact, I have it written down here, the exact, what you have to do online to figure this out. So maybe I'll do that early in the video and you guys can pause it and come back. But first, let me explain what it means a little bit. So it's basically when the planet, you have the declination, right? Which is how high or how low it is from the celestial equator. And when it goes past a certain limit that the sun can't reach, it's out of bounds of the sun's reach. So the sun is the great emperor. So when a planet is out of bounds, either too high or too low, the sun can't govern that planet. So it becomes like a rebel planet. You understand me? You feel me? You get me? So that angular degree is 23.27. So if any planet, either north or south, is past that, it's officially out of bounds. So let me find, before I really go into it, let me go and find. I asked ChatGPT. I have to go into that. I asked them about where do you find it online. I know astro.com. So okay. So there's two options. There is AstroSeek. So it says go to astroseek.com and type in declinations in the search bar. Declinations, or go directly to it gives the site. You can input your birth data and get a full declination chart. You're looking for any planet that goes beyond 23.27 or below negative 23.27. If it's in that beyond that range, congrats, you've got an out-of-bounds planet. I don't know if it's congrats. Oh yeah. So on most, I use a software. On my software, it shows a table, right? I think on AstroSeek is the same. It should show a table, and it will show in order, even if it's like let's say you have one that's +8, one that's -8, because it's actually looking for parallels and contraparallels, which is a whole nother video or something that is very important that I use a lot in my readings, more and more and more. And that's a different story, but those are like, like for example, I have my Mercury parallel Pluto, if you couldn't tell, right? But it's in the 8th house already. So it's like it's like having a conjunction. But my Pluto is like in the 4th house, my Mercury's in the 8th house. So yeah. But anyways, the option 2 is astro.com. And what you do is you go to extended chart selection. After it says create a free account, plug in your your birth info. Once your chart is up, go to extended chart selection, which is like on that top corner thing, that top side thing. And under chart drawing style, select declinations. You'll get a list showing each planet's declinations. I know that sounds complicated. Just use the first one, AstroSeek. It's super easy. I think I've done it on there before, where you just put your birth info in, you click declinations, it gives you a table, and it should color it a different color. Like on my software, it colors them pink. Pink or purple, I can't remember. I think it's pink if a planet is past that 23.27. But you can see, it's really obvious. And you'll get a list showing each planet's declinations. Again, check if anything is outside of the range. Okay. So back to out of bounds. So basically, as I said, there's a certain rogueness, right? A kind of wild, raw energy to an out of bounds planet. And so you have to really break it down with the rest of the entire chart to understand it. But when a planet is out of bounds, like even in current astrology, like when you look at it, like when Mars is out of balance, for example, just by transit, or how would you say that? Like, yeah, like it's a time of increased tension, where there's less of that ability to hold back that Martian energy, even if the Mars is in Cancer, right? So, I mean, I think we saw that. Was it towards the end? Towards the end of last year, I should have had notes on that, but I think was it towards November, December, and there's like a lot of like conflicts during that time. I don't recall exactly. I probably should, but guys, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is for your individual chart. We can make stuff on current astrology for another video, but yeah. So there's a sort of like define the rules, very original. It makes you kind of think of your Uranian energy, like a Aquarian Uranian kind of energy, but there can be great gifts here. But then it could also have a dark side. It could be someone who's more dysfunctional and someone who, can't really cope with reality as well. So what I've seen out of balance, so I can say from my own experience, very briefly, that for me, I am a Sag moon already, right? With a really well-placed Jupiter, 11th house Cancer. And basically, I have a lot of Aquarius planets already. So I've always been someone that just does whatever I want, in the sense of like, I really truly don't care what people think of me. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm a straight male astrologer. Like, I don't care, I just do me, and then people can think what they want, because at the end of the day, people think what they want anyways. People spend about 2 seconds thinking about you or about anyone, and then they go on with their lives, right? And you just do you, and it just doesn't matter. But the whole point is, being out of bounds moon for me was like, damn, okay, I get that. As my Sag moon's out of bounds, it's like uncontrollable. Like, I'm very pioneering. I kind of do whatever I want to do in life. I move wherever I want to move. I don't move by the rhythms of what society tells me I should be doing and how I should be, and then Jupiter, like, that's with my learning, astrology and mysticism and all kinds of stuff that that I believe is interesting. That's where I move towards, right? And also with the moon, it's it's a great intuition. But then also, I'll get into like the dark side of it too. I'm not gonna give it all away, but yeah. And then Uranus is like right on the border, and to me that just speaks to kind of flying through life. It's just like the ultimate. I mean, it goes along so well with the meaning of out of bounds in general, right? It's like yeah. So without saying too much, let's get into each one. So you guys don't follow me on Instagram, or if you guys have followed me for a while on Instagram, you know I have like thousands of long written posts before ChatGPT was a thing, but they're better than ChatGPT. ChatGPT is all very wrong. Like if you're an astrologer and you use ChatGPT, like you're gonna have some insane mistakes, and people like me will clearly see that you're using it. It is very, very wrong on a lot of stuff, important stuff too. Not just astrology, like a bunch of shit, but very useful too. So, anyways, so as I said, it's that independent streak, and very Uranian energy, challenging the norm. But sometimes also people who have out of balance planets, they tend to face resistance and consequences for their action, right? Or actions. And they can also, so these are some of like the more dark sides, right? They can also feel out of position in society. They can feel, because of that rebellious pioneering, it can be kind of like the road less traveled, but then also that can be kind of lonely, or they can be very misunderstood, feeling like they don't belong here on Earth, which a lot of people feel like that these days, right? So it can lead to strong feelings of, kind of, I guess you could say, indifference about the rest of the world in some people. Like you could have someone who, the out of bounds is kind of showing this like genius, outside the box thinker who has what someone, an old client of mine, she told me it was called having uncommon common knowledge. And I thought that was an interesting term, because it's like, to me or to you, it's very common knowledge, but it's very the opposite to average people. And then you kind of get into a place where you're like, all right, am I just going to give up on life? Am I just going to, if no one's going to understand me, am I just going to stay in my corner and maybe have the few people that do? Or am I going to use so much energy going out in the world and still being misunderstood and not heard, even if I prove everything to a T, right? So it's a very brave thing. It's a double-edged sword, wisdom. I know we're on a rant here, but we're about to jump into the planets. It's a double-edged sword, great wisdom and being able. So out of bounds represents, if the sun is the ego, that planet is above the ego. So so you could see, so you could see that that these are very important. Let's see what else I got here. So I would say besides that, super creative too, right? Because it can inspire this very groundbreaking type of creativity and uniqueness, because it's only people, I mean, look at every genius in history, right? They were probably coined as a weirdo before, or someone who, at least like in order to have a great invention or to see the world differently, the great artists, they weren't people who followed the mainstream cults of celebrities. And I mean, it's one thing liking someone's music, but it's another thing thinking that person is above you, right? Or above anyone. So anyways, that's kind of how I would nail it down. So let's start with the moon. Okay, so an out of bounds moon. It's someone like myself. I have this in Sag. So you still want to look at the moon signs, duh. But you feel the emotions very deeply. But it could be in ways that don't always fit society or how society views them, right? So very, very intuitive. Someone who can kind of sense the overall energy of society, like where society is moving, what's BS, what's not BS. Like, I can give examples too for myself and from different people. Like I sensed in 2016 that America was like USA was starting to kind of, well, before that, but like really, I could kind of sense this like downturn, like I felt I was like a sinking ship. I also just never really felt American. I'm French American, but, maybe when I was in high school, but I basically like really was not enjoying it. I like being in Europe. I always liked Europe a lot more. I always felt French. I always resonated more with my French side. And yeah, like eventually I did move not too long after that, and I never looked back. So that would be like ahead of my time, because I think we can, like, that was even before I really, that was like while I was like starting to learn astrology, you know, or around then, you know, maybe a bit before. So the point is, like, yeah, it was after I started learning astrology. I learned astrology before that. But that would be kind of like an intuitive thing, right? Now, I would say also with the moon, it can be someone who can have access to, you know, it can be very psychic. I've seen people with this who are very, very psychic, but also very empathetic, because they sense that wounding, that collective wounding, collective pain. But the biggest thing I would say with the moon is living with emotional authenticity. And they're usually, yeah, so it's someone who's being to be their own drum, right? Because the moon is what makes you happy. So if you realize that what makes me happy is not what society is telling me to do, then you're going to do something different, right? So in relationships, I feel like people with the out of bounds moon can give their partners a feeling that they can, like, it's almost like the partner can feel like their soul is being read, right? And it can bring closeness, but it can also be just like overwhelming emotionally. It really depends on the whole chart, you know what I mean? So you have to kind of add whatever you're saying in the birth chart, you kind of have to add this element. Okay, well, it's a moon in Cancer, well, it's out of bounds. What would that look like, right? But yeah, just heightened emotions all overall. So if it's like me, moon in Sag, that doesn't have any really rough aspects, I'm just going to be, you know, Jupiter and strong Jupiter. I'm just going to be woof, you know, like, I don't even know what that means, woof, but I think maybe people understand. Usually that's how I am, which I guess would be like over, not right now because of the transits, but usually like over the top, you know? I've calmed down in years. Too big of a risk taker. Too big of a, let's just do it, let's just go, you know? That kind of thing. So also in the context of business, I like to talk about that sometimes too, or just like money. People with this moon out of bounds can really predict what the collective will feel next, right? Because they're, like I said, they're really good at understanding the collective energy, so they can be good. Obviously, you have to look at the whole chart. Maybe when it comes to, I don't know, investments, like if you're someone who's in finance, right, or who's an investor, or just trends in general. You know, if you're someone who's a creative and you're trying to like get on top of a wave before it comes, you know, like it's like the people who could feel, I mean, I can't think of an example. Obviously, like the obvious example would be like AI, but that's like so stupid. That's like what anyone would say. I gotta think of something more creative. But yeah, there's always trends. Like if you're a musician, right? Like you see the trend happening in hip hop or in dance music or in different genres right now that's hot. Or, you know, and once again, the paradox is that these people wouldn't want to really go with that, but they would like to if it reflects their originality, they could actually be people that push things ahead, then other people copy them. You see what I'm saying? That may make more sense. Okay. Where are we at with Mercury? Sorry, I have to keep going back at my computer because I have some old notes open that I'm just peering at. So Mercury out of bounds. That's just like someone who thinks outside the box, you know? I haven't seen that many of them, to be honest, but yeah, it's like the kind of unfiltered thinker. And if you think outside the box, that is kind of how I define someone who has the potential to be a genius in a way. We all have our own definitions. For me, you know, you can be an IQ genius, but still be just like completely have zero wisdom to apply it to. So for me, it's like you have to have a nice balance between crystallized intelligence intuition, and wisdom, right? Like you have to have a brain that works, right? I mean, if you don't, maybe you can figure it out. But like part of that is having wisdom and intuition, you know? So if you, for example, have like 180 IQ, but you're spending your whole day, like you have zero guidance internally and you're just like spending your whole day learning about, I don't know, I was going to say trains, because then that makes it sound like it's autistic. I don't know. Maybe something like very scientific, very rational. I can't think of a good example, guys, because that's there's a need for that too. The point is, there's a way to waste intellect, let's just say, and IQ tests are very, very much made for. I mean, they do show one element of it, one part of intelligence, but I think like a lot of the geniuses of history would have had like medium IQs. Like, do you think Van Gogh would have had a high IQ? Like I've seen some of the most genius people I know be like, I'm not good at math. You know what I mean? Sometimes, and you can even like take that to Mercury signs. Like, okay, like Mercury and Pisces, or like a Mercury like that, like especially a combust Mercury and Pisces, or just, you know, Mercury square Neptune. I say that having examples in my head of people who have very high IQs of both of those two, all three of those placements. But yeah, like there's a lot that can kind of make someone more scatterbrained. And actually, that's one of the traits of this out of bounds Mercury. You know, it's definitely a very radical thinker, someone who speaks and writes in very original ways. And yeah, so when it comes to abstract thought, communication, they're, you know, outside the box, like they're brilliant in that, right? Now, the darker side, I think that, yeah, like I was saying, like that detachment from reality, that scatterbrain, that kind of like starting so many things, never finishing any of them. There can be overthinking, and sometimes it's tough for people with this to find other people to connect with. So yeah, there's like a typical societal expectation around communicating and thinking and information, right? So basically, these people are not confined by that traditional idea of what those for those various things. So I think that it's someone, yeah, a lot of people with this that I've seen, they are very high level communicators, and it's like sometimes it's through symbolism, metaphors, archetypes that they can understand reality better through these, right? Than, yeah. I think that a lot of I've seen a lot of people with this who are writers, maybe even having like intuitive psychic abilities. Like I said, this is one I've seen less of. But there can also be like those download moments of brilliance and innovation that comes from this, right? So, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, another thing is like so they're great at seeing patterns where no one else can see them, but they can be very eccentric, you know. So in relationships, right? I think that they can kind of be very interesting to a part, like have like a very strong intellectual connection with their partner, and be very ahead of their time. But then also sometimes in relationships, I'm not talking just romantic, it's like there's a base level of communication that's needed, and sometimes that is more difficult, can be more difficult for someone who has this. But obviously it depends on the whole chart. And yeah, these are people, like I think in the context of business, who are great to have around because they can have that idea that is groundbreaking and you know, can move like kind of move a business or move an idea forward in a direction that that other people didn't see. So out of bounds Venus, we have here someone who is very unique in terms of how they love, their I guess you could say aesthetic style, or their overall aesthetic is very unique, how they express themselves. In relationships, they're not people who are going to follow the rules. They're going to do their own thing. They might have their own. It's kind of like I have Venus in Aquarius, so it's kind of like that. But you have to blend it with the Venus sign with the whole chart. So they'll probably want more space in relationships, and they'll really be drawn to non-traditional relationships. So anything outside societal norms with respect to that, whether it's what's it called, polygamy. I'm not saying everyone with this is like that. They want to feel like they still retain their individual selves within a relationship. So yeah, and besides that, Venus is also how we express love and affection. So there could be unconventional ways of doing that. My throat's been kind of dying on me lately, guys. So, I guess you could say that it really depends, culture to culture, what is deemed as acceptable. But I think that you have to really view this in the context of the culture, right? In some cultures, it's very difficult to break out in this type of way. In other cultures, more liberal cultures, you can kind of do what you want to do. But yeah, so I think also artistically, fashion, Venus influences that. So these people a lot of times are trendsetters in fashion, design, art, stuff of that nature. They're not afraid to kind of be judged, I guess you could say, or to just look different, to be different and express themselves differently, both in relationships and the way that they express themselves. So it can definitely lead to some raised eyebrows, but it's an interesting one. And yeah, so I think also if you think about potential dark manifestation or other manifestation, it can be that fear of intimacy, just commitment issues, where they just don't want to be controlled. They see anyone's claim to them as a claim. Anyone's claiming them in a relationship is like a imprisonment. And they can also be people who are constantly seeking extreme, more taboo types of relationships. And then also in an Aquarian fashion, they can be very unsatisfied with the normal levels of beauty or affection, or it's kind of like that always chasing the high energy, always always thinking about what's better, always thinking about what they don't have. I don't know. It's not all Aquarius. I'm not trying to take a shot here. Mars out of bounds. Mars out of bounds is an interesting one. This one, like I said earlier in the video, it can be very chaotic at times. There's a very intense drive. This one can also have that potential for genius. It's kind of like that person who is willing to take risks that others wouldn't dare to take. Like I said, during times of out of bounds, when Mars is out of bounds, there's less control over that Mars impulse. So if you have that natally, you can imagine that person might just do the thing instead of thinking it through. So, these out of bounds planets, they add a lot, because if we lack fire in our chart, but our Mars is out of bounds, that could tell us a lot. So yeah, okay. What can I say? They're very driven. There can be, I've seen a good amount of athletes, physically gifted, who have this. And yeah, I mean, this is a strong one. They kind of go the direction that they march in a direction that's less traveled, or that they're the pioneer in that sense of really moving in that direction, right? Because Mars is movement, Mars is action, right? So they take the risks that others would not dare take. While some other out of bounds planets I've been talking about might be more about what's in the mind, and yes, the mind can lead to action in a way. Mars could be a more impulsive element of this, right? So what can go wrong? So yeah, they can create or destroy in record time. Yeah. So a lot of energy here. So obviously, when we talk about the darker side, well, I mean, it's kind of obvious. There could be explosive anger, sexual impulsivity. We're just thinking about the shadow of Mars, too much Mars here. Obviously, it does depend on the Mars sign and the aspects and stuff. Erratic type of aggression. And yeah, it could be like someone who's like an adrenaline. There can be, in some cases, like an addiction to adrenaline. Like nothing is ever enough, and it can lead to like this burnout. These like high energy phases and this burnout. Now, also, it's someone who might start to suppress their rage, and then eventually it just erupts. So it needs, out of balance Mars. You need to have a way to get this energy out, right? Because it can really be lacking in this kind of balanced, grounded way, and it can go from 0 to 100 back to 0. So yeah. Still, with that said, these people are trendsetters. They're innovators. They could even contribute a lot to art, or to art. They can have artistic visions that contribute a lot to the advancement of something creative in society. How about that? Now, there's different trains of thoughts about what Mars out of bounds influence is, right? So I gave you one of them. But it really does depend. Like, yes, what I was saying before would maybe manifest with someone with a certain Mars placement. I think overall it's going to give more assertiveness in general. But if your Mars is in Aries, it's going to be a lot different than if your Mars is in Libra, So, yeah. I would say that it's kind of an oversimplification to label them just as volatile or aggressive, like just as it is with any of these out of balance planets. You have to know, like I said with the moon, I'm not overly emotional, but I'm a Sag moon. You know what I mean? But then if someone's like a Cancer moon and they have out of balance, it's going to magnify that. So it's like that with Mars too. So I think that like really, I like Mars is energy. So that's something I would say too, is that they definitely have this unique energetic kind of DNA, I guess you could say, that tends to defy societal norms. And then they tend to have this extra reservoir of energy, right? And sometimes it can be a little bit provoking. But I've noticed that they can push people to kind of reevaluate deeply held beliefs, and they can have the mental stamina. This isn't with all, I've seen this with like Mercury too. They can have like the mental stamina to have those arguments, to have those discussions, to go to those, I don't want to say like rallies, protests. That's not, I don't know what other words, to write, to defend what they believe in online or in person, that kind of thing, So it can be great for leaders in the sense, because they're not afraid to be on the front line. Like I said, a lot of Mars out of bounds could be athletes, extreme athletes, or people training for marathons, people who just have that extra, when they're into something, they can just go, like they can just keep going into the 5, 6, 7 a.m., just however long it takes, right? I think in relationships, they bring that energy. They can bring that energy, that intensity to relationships, which can be very exhilarating, but also challenging for obvious reasons. It just depends on the whole chart, of course. And yeah, I think very entrepreneurial people too, right? Very, very entrepreneurial people, trailblazers in business and in that realm. So they're people who don't want to like work for other people. They have that innate sense of freedom and would rather find out a different way to live and move their life forward than what's accepted, I guess. Yeah, so something I forgot to mention at the start is that it's the Moon, Mercury, and Venus and Mars. Those are so the ones I've covered so far. Those are the most common out of bounds planets. Um, so because they can swing further north or south than the Sun in declination. Outer planets, Jupiter through Pluto, those rarely go out of bounds. And when they do, it's very important, like for that generation. So like you can actually look at the astrology of certain periods of times based on the declinations of those periods of time. So Jupiter out of bounds. So I have this one. Basically, Jupiter out of bounds. Jupiter is that expansive energy. It's that learning energy, or in learning. It's it's the guru within us all. So it's already a super expansive force. So when you have Jupiter out of bounds, it's super, super rare. I didn't realize how rare this was until I started looking stuff up for this. Because I was like, like I said, I have this. Oh my God, I'm so cool. No, but I didn't realize that it's so rarely out of bounds. And I guess the main thing is that, talking objectively about this is that it can be a blessing and a curse. Because everything becomes supersized with Jupiter, right? So you really have to look at how it's placed in your chart. And I would say it's super. So someone with this would be super, super independent, right? Very nonconformist. Like super. And I'm not talking about myself here, guys. I know I have this, so this is part of my duty as a professional is to take myself out of the equation and think of other people I know. But I really haven't seen many with the Jupiter now that I think about it. So I'm kind of just going off of the few things I can remember and myself and what I've researched, right? But basically, yeah, so very entrepreneurial. It's very, very about insight, so wisdom, very intuitive around the type of wisdom that they kind of know this is BS, this is good. And I think that it just makes that person have an extreme drive for what's Jupiter: growth, exploration, adventure, and just positivity, success, right? Optimism. Now, the pitfalls are people like this can find it they can really hate criticism or challenging to accept it. So if someone has an out of bounds Jupiter and you're going to criticize them, like you should do it in a very empathetic way, right? Because if you come at them with a sense of like not if you come at someone with who's a very Jupiterian in general, right, with a sense, and you're saying something that's kind of like low, like you're assuming through how you're talking that they haven't thought of this, they can get very offended. Because in their heads they're like, yeah, I thought about this in every other scenario possible. Like this was like, like this is, I'm not talking to I'm talking to you about this and you're talking about this. So I know, yeah, that's something I notice about very Jupiterian people in general too, is they hate being psychoanalyzed unless it's like you're being very polite about it and you're you're coming at them in a way that's like, look, like I know that you probably understand this and that you probably thought this through, but if you want, I can, like, I'm seeing something, and it's almost like a therapist, right? Like, just like, let me know and I can tell you like what I see. And they'll probably be like, yeah, because like Jupiterians in general are open. They should be, not all of them. They should be open to constructive criticism, right? But sometimes Jupiter can inflate the ego. So yeah. Now also out of bounds Jupiter, what else is Jupiter? Excess. So if someone has vices, those could be addictions, right? They can be over the top people just in general, risk takers, and just super, super ambitious, right? Like they can have these ideas. It can almost be an unrealistic standard. I don't even like that word, but unrealistic standard of kind of perfection that they need in their lives. Now, this can be dangerous if you say the only way I'm going to be happy in life is if I become the number one, most rich, most famous, whatever, this or that. If I'm not there, I'm a failure. But it's God's plan at the end of the day, So yeah, definitely like overconfidence, also spending. Now that goes for Venus too. I forgot to mention that. You got to really like not take on too much, not overpromise, you can just be over the top, right? So it's like you can get into moods where like you are that person, and you're just like, yeah, it will work out. Yeah, okay, I can impulsive decisions, right? I think in business, what's cool about out of bounds Jupiter is that it's someone who's really, really willing to risk the biscuit, which could be good or bad. I always say it's like they walk into the casino and they're the people who are like, yeah, I'm gonna win. And maybe do you manifest from that? I mean, if it's irresponsible and if you've done your homework and you walk in like that, like, look, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Like, I feel as though if I was doing something like something where like I feel like I handle risk really, really well. Like I don't really feel pressure from it. Like you put me in a situation where I'm gambling millions of dollars. This is going to sound arrogant, which you might say that's like out of bounds Jupiter. I think I could genuinely do that as a job. Like, where like it's like as long as I've done my homework and I'm kind of like finance. That's why I used to want to do finance, because I was like, I think I'd be good at that. Regardless, maybe I wouldn't. I always get unlucky with this stuff with the 5th house Saturn. But that's the thing. That's karma right there. That's an example of karma in a chart. It's out of super Jupiterian, but then a 5th house, which rules investments, Saturn. Yeah. So yeah, big risk takers, but there can be like sometimes like the schemes like they could use like a more grounding influence, right? Whether it's in themselves over time or someone close to them who's like, okay, well, let's go over the Virgo, little details. But then they could be really annoyed by that, like, no, don't give me that shit. Like look at the vision, It's kind of like these big visionaries, very Jupiterian, mutable kind of energy. So very, very contagious enthusiasm with Jupiter. It's very hard to get them down. But yeah, that need for groundedness is there. So it could be like remarkable success in business. That person that's like, all right, let's move, let's do it, let's go. Okay, I see the vision. Like imagine it's like it's like what's that show in the U.S.? They have it all over the world with the investors. I don't know. It's like someone comes to you, you have money. Someone comes to you, and you're like, you like the idea. Let's go, let's move. But then also, what's the downside? Well, you need to get your lawyers involved. You need to, kind of negotiate everything beforehand. So great success, let's say, in finding the deal in the first place. Let's say let's give it the context of the deal. They're the ones who find that amazing deal. I know I'm talking like in the sense of an investor, but like whatever. They have money to invest. They find this amazing startup business, but they move too fast and they don't take the time. So that's like what, to get the contracts and everything in place. So you need both. But yeah, very visionary energy. Great for teachers and philosophers who can see the big picture. And I would say also they create their own moral compass, right? And they, of course, like as a Jupiter, they need it's not even a want. It's they need freedom. They're allergic to any form of limitation. Like, it's my world and I don't have anyone telling me what to do, where to go, anything like that. You know what I mean? And they have faith in the impossible. I always say that I don't want anyone around me who tells me, who believes that not everything in life is possible. I think everything is possible, or that, so now also, like, the shadow could be like addiction to growth, like never satisfied with enough. I've definitely seen that. Not with my, I'm just saying with Jupiter. This is like, I'm looking at these as like extremes of the planets too. And like I already kind of said it, like unrealistic expectations, like, when you think like, oh yeah, this is for sure going to work. It's for sure going to work. And then it doesn't. And you're like, oh shit, I took a huge risk on this. I just risked everything on this and it didn't work. Can kind of, tell themselves that things are going to work in a certain way. And yeah, I mean, it could be also, it could be looked at as escapism through constant movement, ideas, or teaching. That refusal of just being with the present, right? It's like Sagittarius, Jupiter. It's very future oriented or conditional. I think also Jupiter, which could be linked to Sagittarius, could be out of bounds. Jupiter could be someone like me who's just a globe, who just lives in one place 1 year, and another place another year. So next we have Saturn. So out of bounds Saturn, another one that's more rare. Basically, like, it's someone who is, well, this one's interesting because, you have Saturn mixed with like a out of bounds energy. You have someone who is very disciplined in non-traditional ways. And they're people who are really, they are their own authority. And, so it's kind of like if Saturn is the authority, it's like out of bounds Saturn can be someone who, they become their own authority, right? They can be very outside the box when it comes to building structures within their own life or within society. I think like the dark side could be someone who is, overly rigid, who lacks structure, or who's overly rigid and unable to kind of structure their life. And there could also be like a deep failure of success, which makes them kind of like not go. And also they can have tendencies towards feeling a lot of guilt, punishing themselves in a way. Okay, so Uranus. Out of bounds Uranus, like I said, I have this one too, where I'm like right on the edge. And out of bounds Uranus is someone who is, I mean, it just goes hand in hand with the definition of out of bounds, right? It's someone who is very rebellious and who goes with their own, has their own rules, their own idea of how life should work, how society should work, like, and they tend to take the road less traveled, right? It's now it's interesting that one is also rare, but this is the one that makes the most sense with the actual meaning. You see, out of bounds Saturn was kind of like, doesn't really make sense. I don't want to speak on something that I don't know, right? I don't have experience, like, because it's like you have Saturn, which is the opposite of Uranus, out of bounds. Well, it's like, it kind of blew my brain and I didn't want to speak too much on it. But yeah, so with Uranus, it's less frequent, but it stays there for longer when it's there, right? And I think that it just adds fuel to this kind of unpredictable energy that one can have as a Uranian already, right? And sometimes people with this can be the black sheep, right? Because there can be this feeling of just being different or having different ideas, which can sometimes come with a feeling of abandonment or a feeling of just being different, right? a sense of loss. And a lot of times people with this actually do have a significant loss or perceived loss or something that feels like separation or something at the start of their life that really, kind of has a massive role psychologically in their psyche. And they usually are people who have to really fend for themselves from a young age. And whether it was, it's someone who has, they tend to have grown up fast and learn fast about the world, about humanity. So sometimes people with this, they learn more about the darker sides of how humans can be at a young age. And an example of this is Stephen King, because what happened with him, obviously the author writes horror. I think people know who Stephen King is. When he was 2, his father left him under the pretense of buying cigarettes and then just never came back. So he also, in his childhood, he saw I think his friend get hit by a train. So he had some messed up things that happened to him, right? And you grow up and then you are someone who's kind of like more prone to taking a course of action in life that doesn't align with the societal norm, right? And so relationships can be very challenging. They can be exciting as well, but it's kind of like there can be, Uranus brings unexpected twists, spontaneity in relationships. So it's kind of like they need that intellectual connection, that sense of revival, of newness, of excitement. But that's to each their own. Some people might like that, some people might not. Now, I'm a good example of this. People with this might just all of a sudden decide to move to a new country or change careers overnight. I literally did that. Last year, I moved to Argentina from Romania without even knowing I was doing it. I like an example. Like I genuinely was living in Romania. I had a whole life there, and then I went to see my mom in California for Christmas. I just had my stuff, and then I knew I was gonna need to stay in California for longer because I had some stuff going on mentally, where I was like, I just need space. I just need to be alone, and then somehow it aligned for me to like go to South America. I thought I was going to be gone for 2 weeks. Literally, I thought I had no idea, and I just booked a trip to Colombia. Then I was there for like a little bit, for like 10 days. Then I went to Peru, was there for like 11 days. I think it was like 11 days each or something. And then I came here, and then I never left. I mean, I've left several times because I have to leave the country every 90 days, but I moved here. All my stuff is still in Romania. It's insane. So that's not to show off. That's just to say, like, would you want to be in a relationship with someone like that? I'm not going to diss myself like that, but it's just that need. It's shocking to some people. I think it can be very misunderstood. It could be like, people can project a lot on people who have out of balance planets. Anything that you don't understand, if an average person will just deem it as either like they're crazy, they might just give up trying to analyze, or maybe they'll just be like, oh yeah, this person he's just different. I'm not going to try to figure out why or how or anything like that. So Neptune out of bounds is very, very rare. This is someone who can be like a channel to the divine world, the world of symbols. Just extremely linked to the collective unconscious, and hyper psychic, clairvoyant, all that stuff, right? Now there can also be that link to getting lost in fantasy, in addiction, and substances, right? But yeah, they can be very prophetic, like especially with their dreams. Artistic geniuses, right? Being able to channel beauty that transcends this world, and just feeling very connected to the cosmos, connected to animals, nature, music, to the whole everything, to the collective soul, the collective one. But yeah, the whole thing is that like when you're like that, there is that potential for perpetual escapism, right? Where you're just whether it's something alcohol, drugs, or if it's into movies, isolation, daydreaming, you know, anything that captures the imagination, which isn't bad, even spiritual bypassing, right? And then also you have to watch out for lacking boundaries, especially like emotional psychic boundaries, because it's very empathetic people also, right? Compassionate to a fault is out of bounds Neptune, which I've seen rarely as well. And they can take on other people's pain, but then they can sometimes attract this energy vampire types, you know? So basically, and please comment below if any of these are resonating with you. I think just being able to channel divine energy is one of the biggest parts for this. Now, like I was saying before, if you have all these talents, but then you have that inability to say no, well, you're kind of screwed, you know? So, overly sacrificing and having energy vampires invade one's energetic aura is very big risk. And yet also, like, you know, they can lack motivation. They can be seen as deceptive, but not be. And people just, like with like outbound Neptune, people can just project BS onto them, right? Like, so just like kind of not being seen for who they really are. Yeah. But yeah, it is definitely a very, very rare cosmic gift to have this. And it is often a sign of spiritual leadership, or at least some form of like artistic brilliance. But it's like the big thing is if you have this, let me know in the comments, like, how do you stay grounded? Because it's one of those things where you have people with certain signatures in their chart where they have everything in here, but then being able to have that plan to make it work physically, to set their schedule, it's like that lack of earth element, you know what I mean? So this would work way better for someone who had like a very who had some earth in their chart or some grounding influences in their chart, maybe a Taurus moon, for example. But then also, even someone who doesn't have this, they can still develop the skills necessary. You know, I'm not fatalist in that way. Out of bounds Pluto. This one is also rare, and very, very intense for society when Pluto's out of bounds, and in general, and psychologically. So it just gives it's someone who can be like a very great spiritual leader, in the sense of like they can guide other people through massive soul shifts and massive eras of their life, right? They can be very fearless when it comes to death, kind of the whole death, rebirth, transformation, but also like physical death. So like allowing, like kind of just like letting go and surrendering and letting change come into their life. Also truth, like they can have like this, you know, kind of like this ability to see very dark, kind of like a crime scene investigator, forensic investigator, right? They can go very deep into these areas of life. And yeah, just lots of power. They hold a lot of transformational power within them. Now, on the darker side, I think that obviously they can, with Pluto out of bounds, it's like that psychological power can be used to manipulate others. That would be another light side thing, would be like just advanced understanding of the human psyche, right? Very, very, very smart psychologically. Now they can use that to manipulate other people psychologically, or, you know, kind of using the power that they have in a negative way to hurt, to control, as opposed to lead and to heal. And yeah, they can become like almost very destructive of them, of others, but especially themselves, right? Like, yeah, they have to watch out for such intense feelings that can then lead to, yeah, I can say the word. And of course, the dark side of anything with Pluto is that obsession, manipulation, control, secrecy, dominance, all that stuff, right? Vindication. They just tend to want to like really like challenge the established norms in society, right? But yeah, like I think the whole becoming preoccupied with power dynamics, that potential can be difficult for sure. It's really something to watch, and that you have to look at the whole chart, right? And I tell this to everyone who has a lot of strong Pluto 8th house Scorpio placements, and they understand. And even at one part of their life, a lot of them, sometimes will admit to have fallen into, because some of the shadow of Scorpio, especially Scorpio South Node, is like the addiction to drama. When the streams of life are too calm, they unconsciously stir things up sometimes. So it's like moving past that. So yeah, like I guess like one like out of bounds Pluto thing might be like someone, yeah, it could be seen as like someone who's like domineering, right? Who's like trying to control their surroundings a lot and get people to come with them, to believe, to follow them, to align with what their desires are. Yeah. So we understand the negative potential, but I think people with out of bounds Plutos, they go there, even if they don't have like a strong Plutonian mark in their chart, this can make them really go through those massive transformational periods, right? Where they break their life into period A, period B, period C, and they can kind of overcome a lot of negative patterns within themselves. Not to say that they're predisposed to those. It is more common to have, to have that with Pluto out of bounds. But yeah, like I think the idea of like pushing boundaries is definitely a true one with Pluto here, because Pluto's an extreme planet already. So you put it out of bounds and it just becomes more extreme. Now, I think when it comes to relationships, an out of bounds Pluto can track it's kind of like Pluto square Venus in the sense that they can track their conquest or their growth in relationships, or in themselves, through their partners. So, for example, like there can be lots of purges and lots of renewals in their partnerships, clearing out the old, making way for the new, that kind of whole thing. Which can, like it can be refreshing, but then over time it gets exhausting. So over time you want to calm the energy down, Scorpio Taurus axis. In business, this is very much about overhauls, right? Especially like within big organizations. And they will be the ones who, push things forward in a very like they can be like the ones, like in a business, something like that, they're pushing things in a very transformative way forward. But you have to watch out for the power element there, as Pluto shadow is wanting all the power and control. So let me just see one thing. But yeah, a lot of the most iconic people in the world, revolutionaries, artists, prodigies, people who refuse to be ordinary, they had out of bounds planets. So it's kind of an energy that when you understand, you can really dive deep into that and how it shows up in your life. So Chiron out of bounds, So yeah, basically, obviously Chiron is the wounded healer. So it's someone who can, push spiritual and just healing in general forward on a societal level. Very, very ahead of their time in that sense. Very intuitive type of healer as well. And they will look at things like ancestral trauma, sexual shame, things that are more taboo. They're not afraid to look at that. So they can be healers that are outside the box types. And also, the bridge between two worlds, the scientific and the spiritual. It can be, these types of people. Now, a lot of the times they'll be very self-taught. They really, or they'll have healed themselves through very traumatic periods. So it's like people who would rather learn through experience than books, but kind of mixing the two together. And yeah, really, really good for guiding people through their deep wounds and their healing journeys. Now, on a shadow side, I would say it's kind of like they might feel like that their wound is too unique for others to understand and never go forward with showing that to the world, or with trying to move things forward, or trying to put themselves out there to help others. And because of that pain, they can feel very isolated and never go through the full Chiron journey of healing the pain and then finding the gift underneath that. They could have that helpless, no one can help me anyway type of energy. And yeah, just the potential for that outsider syndrome, kind of just feeling too different and then just exiling themselves even within a healing community, right? Where they might not even be rejected, but they might feel rejected. So yeah, or the last one I would say was over identifying with the story of being broken, which then leads them to be emotionally isolated or just never fulfilling their potential in this way. So it's almost like being here to heal from a wound that society doesn't fully acknowledge. But in doing that, you're creating new roads for other people. So that's what a lot of it is. Right? And a lot of people with that, they might reject mainstream therapy and kind of do things in their own way. And yeah, attract clients or partners with similar or hidden, similar types of pain or hidden pain. So yeah, now that we've gone through all of these, I'm curious in the comments if anyone has any out of bounds planets and what your reflections are. How much does this move things along in your chart? For me, massive. I've already spoken about it, but it's a good exercise to do whenever you learn something new. If you haven't, if this is new information, having 3 of them for me explains so much, because I always was wondering why is it so much easier for me to take risks, but at the same time, there's you have to, with everything astrological, you have to give yourself credit to, you can't just, you have to understand that someone can have the same chart as you, but you can't just blame everything. You can't blame everything on the stars, but you can't give all power to the stars. Now, all glory to God in the end, of course. But what I'm saying is that sometimes we have to congratulate and love ourselves, right? That's a big, something that some spiritual circles are missing, is that when you do something great, it's when you do something horrible, you punish yourself. But then when you do something great, you're just yeah, whatever. So getting in the habit, just like if you were your own baby, right? Or you were your own best friend, you would be very yeah, you did it, or you would congratulate them. You would try to get them pumped up about themselves, about their lives, because you have love for that person, someone you love, right? So it's the same thing for you. It's how do you find that within yourself? How do you encourage and push yourself forward, right? So with these out of bounds planets, we see that each one has its own signature. Now, if you want to go deeper into your chart, guys, message me, or actually just go to my website, jesseandasonastrology.com. You can book a live session or a recorded one. Live is what I've been doing the most, and I don't even have a time limit these days. It probably won't always be like that, but it just goes for as long as it needs to. And we start with natal, but I offer everything. I mean, you know, if someone wants to do have a compatibility done, I can get that done. Astrocartography I do as well, and then I teach astrology one-on-one. This is like the best. You're not going to find better teaching than this. You're just not. For the price, one-on-one with me, like we're going into everything. We're going to learn the system organized in an organized Virgo way, but then also having that Piscean intuitive approach to it. I give my all. I wish I had like all my students here to just vouch for me, but trust me, if I had testimonials, every single one would be saying great things, and that's not me being arrogant. That's just me giving my absolute all. You know, I'm talking like sometimes just a week ago, a 7-hour session. You know what I mean? And just being completely wiped out. But that's just what I've been doing lately, out of love. So. Yeah, let me know. And obviously, thank you for watching regardless. I appreciate everyone. And if you made it this far, you're amazing. And I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like, and I hate saying this, but it definitely helps the YouTube to like, comment, subscribe, all that BS. So, all right. Ciao.